under the right to know.
That's right.
So in the 2-hour training, would the employer be responsible for instructing me as a worker as to what chemicals might be hazardous to me?
It's required.
It's required.
It's required.
So it's not, I don't have to go look these things up somewhere else. They're supposed to be telling me these things.
That's right.
What happens then if I have an employer, or what should I do if I have an employer and I know I'm dealing with chemicals, they're labeled, but I don't have any idea what's in them or what the problem is with it. How do I do something about that?
You're supposed to have a safety data sheet on the chemical compounds, which tells you
what's going to happen if I get exposed to it. And if I don't have those safety data sheets?
Then, if you're in an organized shop,
call your union.
That's right.
What about if you're not in an organized shop?
Then you should call labor and industry.
The law mandates that the employer provide those MSDS sheets to you within 48 hours when you request them.
And if the employer doesn't provide that information, either knowingly or unknowingly, what are the penalties for that?
Ooh, I haven't been that close to the law that I do know the penalty.
Ernie, how about you? Do you know what they know?
I think they deal with those on an individual basis. It depends on how great of
the intent was of the employer?
Yeah, and if the employer has some there and they don't have one particular one, then they may be a little bit more lenient with that employer.
How did you become so informed of this?
Through our international union and funding through the Superfund Act of the United States Congress with Superfund legislation, we have been instructed through NIOSH with hazardous materials training, and I'm a certified instructor in that field.
Well, what language is NIOSH?
Herb, I'm not prepared for all of this. The National Institute of Occupational Health and Safety.
I'm impressed. Toby, I've got to keep going here. I was looking over some of the different things that you're involved in, and it's just incredible. Our program isn't long enough, and we hope to get you back in the near future. Would you talk a little bit on for instance, uniform probate law and limitation on credit card interest and some of the things as a consumer affairs, the telephone solicitation, the different things that annoy the hell out of us. The computer gets us on the phone, they tie our phone up, etc., etc. Can you talk a little bit about some of those things?
The telephone solicitation, that's my pet peeve.
Yeah, yours and mine too.
You come through the door and the phone is ringing, and I'm the kind that has to pick up the phone. And under telephone solicitation, it used to be that they would call you and begin the pitch. They didn't have to identify themselves or anything. And many of the pitches were 3 to 5, 7 minutes long. And they were structured in such a way that even if you hung up your telephone was still tied up with this pitch. When the state legislature was concerned about what was happening, because many of us had the same feeling, we wish they'd go away. We were finally able to get a limit on the time of the call, and the fact that before they proceed with their pitch, whether it be machine or human, that they needed to identify themselves and who they represented. One of the things that we wanted to do, but we had resistance from the telephone companies because they do use the phone directories. We wanted the consumer to be able to designate that they did not wish these kinds of calls, and that there be some way to mark your name in the phone book indicating that you didn't want those calls. Well, we were not successful at that time, and we're still not. We've never gone back about it. But this was to cut the calls off altogether. But we do have a law which says that they call you, there's a limit on the call, they need to identify themselves and who they're representing.
I think that's a real advantage, because at least that way when you pick up the phone, you know in the first 30 seconds whether it's something you want to listen to, or whether you just as soon say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm hanging up, or sorry, I'm not interested.
But there's a problem.
What's the problem?
American business is very ingenious.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the what they call the bucket shops operating out of Texas or some other state who are not covered under the Minnesota laws. And so a lot of these calls you're getting now
So you
are...
can speak to Bob from Texas.
Right.
Bob the computer.
Yeah.
So, and he doesn't have to follow Minnesota laws, so they can...
So by the time you get down to them and you have the Texas Attorney General handle it, they're gone.
Yeah, that's another pet peeve. In our office, we often get calls from fundraising organizations, supposedly charitable. And I've started checking back on them. One that called a few weeks ago spends 90% of its income on fundraising.
Right.
It's really upsetting when you realize some people are making a healthy living off of charity.
And you're absolutely right. The charities law in the state of Minnesota has not been updated since Walter Mondale was the Attorney General.
It's quite a while.
And now that his son is in the legislature, I've suggested to him that he might review the charities law and maybe next session bring in an updating. But that's true. You get more solicitations for this cause and that cause, and the names are very similar. And so many times they can segregate now names, you know, those that are between 30 and 50, those that are between 50 and 100, so that they know their audience before they call you. And my problem, and I'm sure it's the problem of a lot of people, is that when they call you with the story and the need and so on and so forth, if you say no and you hang up the phone, you have a guilt complex afterwards, you know.
You're right.
But you really need to say, send me the material.
Yes, that's what I do now. When they call, I say, send me the material. I want to know how much money is spent on administration and fundraising, and how much actually goes to the organization that they're promoting.
Exactly.
And often you don't hear from them again.
That's true.
This leads to my next question, that maybe we ought to have a cooling off period for groups that hold this one on. You were involved in legislation on that cooling off
On the cooling
period.
off period, yeah, because back in the days when we were working on the cooling off period, there was a lot of door-to-door salesmen who were selling vacuum cleaners, magazines, all kinds of products, or soliciting over the phone and making appointments and coming out to see you, and using high-pressure sales techniques. And you might have a young mother with a couple of little kids who's a little harassed, you know, trying to take care of her kids and listen to this pitch. And then you're told, this is a wonderful bargain, but you got to sign today because tomorrow we have to raise the prices. And she signs the contract. And then when she has time to think it over, she knows that she had no business doing it. She has those 3 days in the cooling off period to indicate that she doesn't want the contract, and the employer has to return her money.
Toby, does that apply to any time somebody sells something, or?
No, if you solicit the sale, that's a little different.
So
It's a different set of facts.
So if you
If I
call
go to-
somebody,
That's been a problem for consumers over the years.
it seems strange to hear the union involvement in the protection field. You know, it just seems strange.
Well, you know,
Just involved
workers
so
have
much.
to have rights, and the rights have to go beyond the workplace.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to when the unions were first formed.
Yeah.
They weren't just for negotiating contracts. They were for taking care of each other and helping each other out.
Exactly.
And that what you're saying is that your role in the labor movement has continued that part of it going, that we're looking out for each other, even if it's a larger organization now and we don't all know each other personally, that we're still trying to take care of people who are in the same situation we're in, where we have to go to work each day to make a living.
It makes no sense to provide good working conditions and a good contract in the workplace, and then turn you loose in the marketplace and leave you naked.
Not
Good
the
point.
truth.
But used cars, there's always been a problem with used car sales, used cars techniques, and back in the good old days, you know, once you drove that car off the lot, even if you just got the front wheels off the lot, and if it fell apart, that's too bad. The used car dealer had no... So then we worked, and now you see those stickers, as is,
Yeah.
and warranty. That was the law that was passed, what we call the 11 car law. On the new cars, we also have 11 car law, which provides that if you have to take a brand new car back X number of times, it's in the shop X number of days, you have a right to go to mediation, and the Better Business Bureau handles the mediation with the mediators, and the issue is resolved as to whether you should get another car or if you have a legitimate complaint.
How about interest rates on credit cards?
Interest rates on credit cards. Here again you have the problem of you have the credit cards outstate. But in Minnesota we've tried to limit, this is on revolving charge accounts. We have tried to keep the interest rates down as far as possible. And some years we've been successful and haven't had them raised, and other years we have not.
Interesting.
What about the work, or the capitalists out there who says, why would workers care about what the interest rates are? You just shop around for the cards you want, and if you don't want to pay the interest, you don't borrow the money.
Open-ended, no, we're talking about young families, primarily, who are not able to make cash payments, who need to charge whatever it is, a large appliance or whatever, but they cannot make the full, you have 30 days in which to pay the bill. But after the 30 days, you have to pay the interest on the bill if you're not doing that. And not only that, but we've been teaching people in the United States for years, buy now and pay later. And we've all bought the philosophy. And when it comes time to pay later, we find that we have such a large debt we can't take care of it. And so then we're stuck with these high interest rates, and it just takes forever to get it down again.
So you were instrumental in limitations on those interest rates here in Minnesota?
On revolving charge.
On revolving charges?
Yeah. Open-ended credit, we haven't been successful yet.
How about, I have so many topics I'd love to cover right now. Uniform probate law, is that the same as the no fault?
It's the same as no fault, yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit, what it actually is?
Uniform probate. For years in Minnesota, everybody had to have an attorney to probate the will or probate the estate, and it didn't make any difference whether it was $25 or $25,000. You couldn't file the papers with the courts, you couldn't do anything unless there was an attorney doing it. And in many instances, the attorneys who were handling probate would put that on the back burner. They knew they could always come back to it. And people had to wait months and years to get an estate settled. Meanwhile, the attorney kept saying, well, next week or next month or whatever. And finally, a bill came into the state legislature, which we call the probate law, no fault, which means that you as an individual can designate somebody to handle your estate for you, a layperson, and that you file your will indicating your desires with the probate court. And then when the time comes, whoever you have designated can handle that estate without ever going near an attorney.
What are you working on?
All services.
All services.
Are you also working on...
Working with...
one of the interesting things...
Or to meet their current bills, their mortgage payments or whatever.
But at the same time, we're hearing all these...
Healthcare that was available will be gone also.
It might be interesting for us to...
And pass it on to the states. And then the states would have to...
that it took work to get them through the legislature. How...
It's still important.
Okay.
No, but...
There's one thing
That's true.
That's right.
That they have to be one free facility.
Still could be jumping.
7.
What do you send it to your hospital you hope to go to, or how does
The
it
doctor. The doctor.
To your doctor.
What happens if...
Or you can designate a family representative or somebody else.